really disparate because it is a franchise, and a big portion of the Hooters restaurants are owned by the parent company, which is owned by private equity firms, and then sections of the company are operated by various franchisees. And the story we wrote is about how the core group, which is the original founders of Hooters, they're now a sort of a super franchisee, are looking to take over the brand itself and be that parent that tells everyone else how to execute on the brand and institutes their policies.
Okay, so let's talk about how they're planning to execute and what those new policies are going to be. The story starts out with the diverse clientele that Hooters may not necessarily, I want to say be known for, but they don't necessarily have that image in at least popular culture. Who's going now and who do they want to see there?
That's right. Well, this group of original restaurants has always been and has really focused on being friendly to families, and that can mean everything from having coloring books in the restaurant, which is something I've heard from a lot of customers in the process of reporting this, or servers paying extra attention to kids. But they've always historically had a lot more women coming into their restaurants. So they have couples coming in, they have families coming in, and the data we had showed that the Hooters of America owned, private equity owned branch leaned more into competing with the likes of Twin Peaks and the chains that were getting more risque, and in the process lost that diversity of customer, and that shrunk their opportunities for sales.
You know, what's funny is I never thought of Hooters as a family restaurant. So it's interesting
I think you're not the only one, Carol.
Going back to their family roots. I am curious, kind of talk to us about the founders that are leading the charge and looking to make these changes.
Yeah, well, Hooters was launched in 1983 by a group of 6 businessmen in Clearwater, Florida, who seemed, by their telling, sort of started it on a whim, and they're still going with it this many years later. And right now, one of those men who was involved in the original founding has been the CEO ever since the 90s of the 22 core Hooters that are part of the original branch. And he's the one who's engineering this whole charge to bring it back to its roots. Neil Kiefer.
So what has to happen in order for this to be successful? The company's had challenges like many restaurants during the pandemic and following the pandemic. Rising costs, rising labor costs, rising food costs, and just a general change in the way the consumers are thinking about this stuff. What do they have to do to pull this off?
Well, on top of all that, one of the trickiest things for them to pull off an actual restructuring, all they really want to do is be able to hand over control to the founder group, which is willing to take on new restaurants and rehab the brand. But there is about $350 million worth of complex structured debt that is on the balance sheet of Hooters, which the current owners and previous owners put there in order to help finance this big expansion under private equity. And that structured debt is not supposed to ever have to make it into bankruptcy court because it's supposed to be heavily securitized by cash flows and other revenue. So right now they're really digging in on how to possibly address restructuring ABS in bankruptcy, which is rarely done.
Yeah, it feels like a big list of things that might be against them. I mean, I know they want to bring back the Hooters shorts, fresh ingredients, greeting women first at the door. I love the details in your story. I mean, it all sounds great, but as you mentioned, this complicated debt. And then I feel like it's a restaurant space that has changed and evolved a lot since they first started out. And in some ways, maybe there's too many restaurants out there. Do industry observers think that they have a good shot of this company kind of coming back in a kind of going back to its roots and then staying around?
Well, what industry observers say, and what some of the advisors and sources that we've talked to who are looking at the deal right now, is that it's really going to come down to analyzing restaurant by restaurant which one is in a reasonable location in terms of demographics and establishment of the brand in that place. So what they're relying on so heavily is the decades of name recognition, and they really need to choose wisely about where to lean into that and where to keep their restaurants open.